a big thank you for having me, albeit in a less than ideal situation. When we agreed that I would join this event, it was intended to be in person, and I apologize for not being able to be there in person. It is the end of the day for you. I understand it was a day packed with a lot of activities, so I am the final segment of the day. I'll try and keep it light and breezy, and in particular, lively. I expect that, although you've given me a kind introduction around my background, that what I'm here to talk about is really digital sovereignty and EuroStack. And I would like to start with really giving you the motivation for this kind of initiative, which I'm sure is clear to many of you, but I think it is worth stating. The motivation is that, as a background, as mentioned, I was involved in antitrust and regulation, and the conviction that I've matured over time, having been involved in that world for so long, is that however well-intentioned, however well-meaning, we in Europe have devoted enormous amounts of effort to antitrust and regulation in the hope that this somehow would limit our dependencies or limit the way in which dominant platforms exercise their power over us. And this was not just a European fixation. Of course, during the Biden administration in the US, this year right now, there was a great deal of enthusiasm for the idea that antitrust at least could do something around the power of the major digital platforms. When I was working in consulting, I remember my then clients asking, but this regulation that Europe is doing, how is that going to deliver us an industry? So very well to tame the dominant player. How is it exactly going to deliver European assets and capabilities? And that was a question that always stayed with me, because at the end, it is very well to tame the excesses of dominant monopolistic players. But what matters to us as Europeans is what are the things we are putting in place that are ours and are capable and functioning, that give us a position in all of this. So the bottom line is that indeed, as I expected, regulation and antitrust in Europe absorbed a lot of energy, but didn't deliver anything. This is the reality. We need to face it. It isn't a judgment on the people who thought it was a good idea, but the reality is name one regulation which is actually delivered in the way of, other than a fairly minor, marginal updates. I was looking today at the BEUC report that says, the DMA has improved outcomes for consumers. And then you look at the list of improvements and it's like, oh my God, this stuff is so small ball, it's so marginal that this doesn't really make the dial. So proposition number one, we spent a lot of energy, we channeled a lot of energy into regulation and antitrust, thinking that that would deliver us an industry. The news flash is that it can't, it won't, and that's over. Even before Mr. Trump came on the scene and effectively disabled European regulation, for reasons we know very well. The second motivation for me is that while we talk a lot about our values, democracy, the kind of things we want to protect, this is something which I also kind of value. But my experience in industry is very clear. Unless you are essentially putting industry, meaning investment, meaning funding, meaning actual assets in place, the rest is talk. We can talk for hours and days about our values and our democracy and how we need to protect it, and it's all very nice. But having more think tanks and civil society telling us that isn't going to create any movement on the ground. So it isn't to say that I don't appreciate these voices. I think they are nice mood music. But unless we see concrete action in the way of assets being installed, investment being made in Europe by Europeans, then we're just talking. And the third dimension of all of this is that, again, while I appreciate the efforts that the European Commission and other regulators are making in trying to scope out what the shape of the effort should be, the reality remains that, to my mind, the public sector has never been a particularly efficient allocator of capital. It's nice to work alongside, but private enterprise needs to be in the driving seat, because there is no scenario, I think, realistically, in which a bureaucracy can create a map of the digital future of Europe for the next 30 years. It is not credible. It is by definition a bureaucracy. They are not tasked with making money. And unless one makes money, nothing happens. So all of these motivation actually converged into the EuroStack notion, which is pretty much, to my mind, an industrial strategy initiative. It is not civil society, it's not think tank. All of that is done by other voices, and by all means, I welcome them. But the idea is really to empower European industry to actually do what needs to be done, which is certainly try and push for customers to buy Europeans, certainly sell European, because we also need to confront what are our own weaknesses. Our weaknesses are that, of course, compared to the incumbent hyperscalers, the European offer is fragmented and not exactly equivalent. So European industry needs to work together to create alternatives that are integrated and that customers want to buy. And this is on industry. This isn't going to come by fiat from the European Commission. One of the things that I find most unnerving when I talk to industry is that the kind of excuses, frankly, that I hear most of the time from industry are three. Number one, our products aren't as good as the Americans. Okay, if you're saying that, where are we going? And make them better. The Americans are too good. Number two, the customers don't appreciate our products. Well, again, this is a bit like that meme, my wife doesn't understand me. No, maybe the product sucks and you need to make it better, because it isn't as if the customer is stupid. The customer has a choice. And if the customer thinks your product isn't up to scratch, well, you need to make it better. The third thing that you hear all the time is the European Commission must be doing this. When have we been infantilized in this way, that we need to wait for someone from above, some deus ex machina, some bureaucrats to do something? What are we doing to move things along? And here are the sort of the pillars of EuroStack, which are by European. And this is both private sector and public sector. Of course, I don't need to tell you that it is a comedy that today I speak to the European Commission on Microsoft Teams. I speak to the German government of Microsoft Teams. There are signs that things are moving, but this is comedy. Because the reality of Europe is that while in America you have buy American as default, nobody would dream in the public sector of buying French. Of course, China doesn't even need to be mentioned. Then you have buy Korean, buy Japanese. In Europe, we have buy from everywhere. This is our default law, buy from everywhere, which was originally motivated by, of course, an idea that French shouldn't only be buying from France and German shouldn't only be buying from Germany. That's fine. But the implication of it is that today, the obstacle that we face, if we want to include some sort of buy European clause into any kind of procurement directive, the pushback is we're discriminating. You want to discriminate. Are you serious? Discriminating in what way? We're not suggesting that there should be autarky or there should be protectionism, But what we need to create is a space in which European products can be sold and therefore investment can be made. Because let's face it, not everybody needs subsidies from above. A lot of companies tell me if I have customer demand, I am actually funded. I can find the money. The money is not a problem if I can actually sell my product. So pre-procurement is essential. Commitment to purchasing is essential because then the banks will lend, the funders will lend. But if you are in a world in which every time you have buy European, you have to worry about whether the other side will send the lawyers around or sue us because of WTO myth, then this is insane. It's truly insane. And even American friends of mine, I'm here in DC, tell me Europeans need to be saved from themselves because the fact that you guys are even taking seriously the idea that you're discriminating if you're trying to do buy European is comical. So buy European is an important pillar, public and private. In the private sector, what I'm beginning to see is that companies are contacting me, EuroStack, and saying, we are concerned about dependencies. We want to shift our load into European cloud, for example. What are the actual alternatives that we can use for an integrated service? So this is beginning to really appear. It's not true that companies don't care. At the level of boards, there is increasing aware about these dependencies in the private sector demand side. And there is sell European. Of course, we need to sell European, and companies need to come off their perch. They need to realize that either they work together or there is no credible alternative that they can offer. They all go, oh, but we're not Gaia X. Of course, you're not Gaia X. We are not Gaia X. No one, Gaia X is over there. But unless there is an effort to produce a portfolio of products that is attractive, the customer will say, wait a minute, why do I have to make all this effort to integrate the various bits of cloud and software and hardware? I want to just, I go to AWS because they give me a turnkey and, ready-made solution. Where is the equivalent European? And some people delude themselves that they have an equivalent. They actually don't. They really need to work together. And this is foundational. And it is part of the work that needs to be done on the supply side, on the industry side. And finally, Fund European. Fund European is actually happening because one of the things that I see is that private family offices, VCs, private equity are waking up to the potential for European tech. And I mean, you'd have to be asleep not to see it. There is defense tech, there is various dimensions of European tech, which are potentially attractive. So a number of funds are in the process of being developed, which could be attractive investment into European companies and products, not just startup. Because what I care about is sort of the scale up, the mid-level, the companies that are already there, but they are struggling to become bigger. So in all of this, I think that industry really need to take the lead, working together with the public sector. I'm not suggesting that they can be cut off, but industry motivation needs to be driving ultimately the plan. Because there is no escaping the fact that unless people make profits, there is no basis for an industry. And we can talk until we're blue in the face about our value and democratic and this and business models that are not like the hyperscalers. What are we even talking about? We in Europe are this big relative to the hyperscalers. There is no scenario in which we're coming anywhere near a monopoly problem on the part of. So, all of this kind of indulgent talk about we shouldn't replicate the model of the hyperscalers. This is so by the by, so kind of peripheral. Clear the debris. The only thing that matters is ultimately what Mario Draghi has actually put on the table, which is, guys, we have an economic model which is non-viable today. As a continent, we rely on exports of cars and a few other things, and we are getting killed. It so happens that digital is a general purpose technology that goes into every single sector. It goes into defense, it goes into cars, it goes into everything you want. And the reason why the productivity growth in Europe and the US has gone like this, Europe is gone sort of flat and the US has grown, is because the digital sector has driven productivity with the adoption and penetration that they have. So unless we build European assets, we can talk about our democracy and our values. Honestly, I don't care. I don't care about that stuff. I don't think it's the thing that is central to Europe right now, in the same way as I don't think that Google search and Google ad tech, all of these antitrust cases matter one bit. People get incredibly agitated about that. You know what? The future of Europe doesn't depend on the outcome of Google search. Let's face it. And we have other fish to fry. And I really encourage everyone to get on this urgent path, which has got to be one of industrial strategy, because digital is pervasive and drives outcomes. So let me leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cristina. Thank you for brilliant.
I can't hear you,
you cannot hear me? Can you hear me now better?
Yes, I can.
So thank you for brilliantly making a brilliant recap and reflection of where we are standing. If you are kind enough to stay with us for a minute, perhaps we have around 100 people left until the very end. If we can take one question.
Die hard.
Yes.
Die hard.
So is there any question that you would like to ask to Cristina? Or
Probably
yes, we have just a second.
Okay, so thank you very much, Cristina. You followed up my talk on very similar issues. I wonder whether the issue about how do we get appropriate investment. You talked about these developments of funds, but the problem with many of these funds is that they're looking to become extractive. They're looking to become dominant. How do we get funds which will invest for sustainable long-term development? How do we get those types of funds in? How do we get people to be funding the stuff which isn't a quick return on investment and or going to a monopoly?
No, that's a very good question. And of course, historically, these VCs have been really problematic because, of course, of the return they look and the rapidity of that return. It is not lending itself to that kind of patient capital that we need in a number of places. And one of the things I'm insisting on whenever I'm talking to funders is that they need to understand that they need to adjust the timing to be more than 3-year turnaround, because this is not the basis on which you can realistically invest in projects that are promising. I get it. On the other hand, you know, what is our alternative? We wait for the European Commission to sort of throw money around helicopter style so everybody can kind of, as Bert, whom I love and adore, says it's 100 million for meetings. Let's all meet in Barcelona or in Vienna, take a selfie and put it on LinkedIn. And that's what we've done. Amazing. So we know that the reality of funding from the Commission and from the states, from the Commission in particular, is slow and baroque in its own requirement. So I personally welcome private capital now focusing on the European problem, and I will do all I can to just push this to be more suitable. But we need to somehow attract private capital to this in a way that hasn't happened so far. And you know, I hear completely what you're saying, and I don't have a full answer. All I can say is that until now, European tech was not that attractive to anyone, and it is now more attractive. So it's a bit of progress.
Thank you very much, Cristina, for sharing your insights. And hopefully we will see you in person in some of the upcoming Nexus Forum summits.
I'd be delighted. And again, apologies. And particularly thank you for sort of hanging in there until 5:30 in the evening. This is remarkable. So I think you all deserve a drink.